Alzheimer's and dementia are illnesses that affect people across all spectrums of society, and many of us will have encountered these illnesses through those we love and see how profoundly this illness affects them. In his new book, Mam and Me, Living a Lifetime in a Day, Kieran Coote offers a powerful account of a mother and son united by their deep bond and unwavering commitment for one another. The book portrays a typical day of caring for his mother, Patricia, interwoven with memories from before her diagnosis of dementia. It is a poignant and beautiful narrative that highlights the emotional journey of caregiving. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kieran Coote about his heartfelt memoir. Kieran, thank you for your time today. Thanks for taking time to chat to me.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Great to be here.
Kieran, just give us a bit of background, first of all, about yourself. Tell me, in terms of, just give a flavour of where you come from, who you are, what you're about. Tell us a bit about yourself, your own background, in terms of your youth, where you grew up, your life story. Just summarise it for me.
I'll try and keep it brief, but basically, I'm from Fairview here in Dublin, still in the same family home, nearly 100 years later, as it turns out. I'm one of 5 sons. My mum was from here in Dublin. My father was from Ennis in County Clare. Grew up in Dublin. Been working in the catering industry, my hospitality industry, my whole life. I have 4 daughters. That's another story, and probably another book as well. But I'll keep that going. And I'm still living in Fairview now. I work part time with catering, and that's kind of my background.
Throughout the years, your connection growing up with your mother, just to kind of, I suppose, give a bit of background what we're going to be talking about. Tell us about your connection with your mother as you were growing up throughout the years.
Yeah, Mam's very strong. I mean, my mother was Patricia Rigney, Patricia Coote, nee Rigney. But Mam was a child of the 40s. She was the youngest of 9 siblings. She was working at the age of 14 as a temp here in Dublin as a legal secretary. She had to quit her job, as all the ladies had to do when they got married. She married my dad, and they had 5 sons. One which died in infancy, my brother Alan, 1972. Years later, their relationship broke up and they separated. And Mam was really left to bring the 4 of us up, which she did. She worked 2 jobs. And it wasn't easy for her, but we got through it. My eldest brother, Tom, was a priest. He passed there recently from motor neuron disease. My second brother's out in Australia. It's a real classic Irish family. There's myself and my youngest brother's here in Dublin. And that's really the story of Mam up into her late years. We were very close. I mean, I had my own story is another book, but my own story. I had a very close relationship with Mam. I'd been living with her for quite a few years, with my daughters, in and out. So our paths had been very close for a lot of years. I'd lived abroad for a few years, so obviously we separated, and then finally our paths kind of joined again. And in the last few years, they became bound together through our experience.
Give us an understanding. You mentioned your mother was a lady from the 1940s. Whereabouts did she grow up? Just to paint the picture, of course, the 1940s was no easy time to grow up in Ireland. Very much embroiled by Eamon de Valera's economic war, many argue. But it wasn't an easy time to grow up. Tell us about her memories, what you learned from her about her childhood.
Well, Mam's born in 1939. She lived in Fairview in Dublin. This house, Fairview Marino, this was the first housing estate that was built by the Irish government started in the 20s, mid-20s to 1927. Our family moved here. This was a response to the tenements in the city centre. So Fairview Marino was built on a project at that time called the Garden City Movement, which was trying to provide homes with green spaces, but with practical amenities. So you're the best of country, best of city. That's what Fairview Marino is at the moment. So that's where she grew up from. Her mum and dad were from the city centre of Dublin. So she ended up going to school in what's called Stanhope Street Convent. I often laugh when you hear the song Dublin in the rare old times. Um, they were tough times, as you can imagine. Poverty was never far away, and hard days, And she went to secretarial school, and at 14, she was asked to go and work for a legal secretary on Capel Street in Dublin. And Mum always said them years were the happiest days of her life, when she was out in the world and working. So yeah, good memories like that. Mum had five sisters, so four sisters, sorry, um, and three brothers, and they all kind of grew up and lived in the house. She was the youngest. Her mum passed away in the house here in the 60s from kind of TB consumption. So a lot of history around the house here. Um, and shared memories, and that really worked for us later on when memories start to fade. um we had the actual geography and the history around us to help anchor her in the present moment and the reality of the world.
Tell us in that regard. I want to get it from from what I understand about the book itself. She had quite a vibrant spirit. Of course, the woman from the 40s, 50s, as you mentioned yourself, poverty was never very far away. So that has to have instilled something in this woman. Tell us more about, you mentioned about you knew enough about the history, the geography and everything else of her life to anchor her in where she was. But it gives a bit more, tell us a bit more about the story she would have told you about her childhood, where grew up in the 20s, 30s, the environment she grew up, just to paint a picture of the character she was.
Well, the real stalwarts, these people. Mam's dad had been an alcoholic and kind of spent the family money, this type of thing. um So there was never a lot around when they grew up. They never asked for much. The expression "first up, best dressed" was coined for people like this. Real people. Mam's real anchor really was the church. To be honest, Mam went to mass every day, all the way through to the end. She sang in the choir for 50 years. She's a beautiful singer, great voice. More than 50 years. Um, she was married in the local church. She was baptized in the local church, all of that type of thing. So that was a real strong point for Mam. Mam was very, very strong in that regard. She told me 100 times it wasn't for that, she never would have through things. But being the youngest as well, she was the Babs, and she got the benefits that the other sisters through that and brothers through the harder years didn't quite have. So things weren't quite as bad for her. Yeah, Mum was a pioneer her whole life, based on the father's kind of shenanigans, and so were most of her brothers and sisters. Actually, they never took a drink. Um, that was her earlier days. Of course, she met my dad. My dad was a soldier. He was in the Irish Army, served in the Congo. He was a physical education teacher there. So they really hit it off. He was a pioneer too. And it was only later, after he got married and he started working here, and he left the army and joined the teaching, that he became a teacher, that things became a little harder for the two of them. And then, of course, having kids, and then a child dying in the 70s, I think was really, really rocked their world. And we moved from Fairview to Santry for a few years, 7 years, in fact. Then we moved up to Glasnevin after my parents separated. We moved to Glasnevin, and we were there in the parish of Iona for 18 years. And Mam really, two doors away from us was the Mrs. Valentine. She was a very formidable woman. She was the leader of the church choir up in Iona. And when Mam had separated from Dad, as happens a lot at the time, he became socially isolated because you weren't married, and wasn't a done thing. And so when we went to Glasnevin, because Mam was a beautiful singer, Mrs. Valentine, of course, immediately had her in the choir, and it was through that avenue that Mam became accepted in the parish. It was her voice that carried her through. So that's what happened. Then she met lots of good people, and Iona is a fabulous place. 25 years after we left, we moved back into Fairview because my auntie Pauline, who was living here in their family home, the last person here, she got Alzheimer's, and we ended up moving back in 25 years after we'd moved out. So without saying, I've described that in the book. My book is two parts, really, Arthur. It's a day caring for Mam, and every second chapter is Mam's life story. So it's a day caring plus a memoir. So by the time you've got to the end of the book, you've gone through a day with myself and Mam. and you've also gone through Mam's lifetime. So it's living a lifetime in a day is the kind of the secondary title, you know.
Your relationship with her, what really shaped and molded that relationship with her throughout the years? What was it in terms of, I know myself, I grew up in the, I was born in the late 70s, grew up in the 80s, so the wooden spoon was never far away. And of course, you know, I mean, today people might kind of reel in horror at the thought of the wooden spoon, but it was very much part of the life. And you know what? As many as might disagree with me, you know, it didn't do me a whole pile of harm, you know. But I mean, in terms of times were a lot tougher, I imagine, for you. You were a few years before me, perhaps. But in Dublin, especially, the poverty, as I said, wasn't very far away. Give us some aspects of what actually shaped and molded your relationship with her.
Yeah, I think Mam was there for us, Arthur. There for me in particular. She was there for all of us, you know. I never forgot that. You know, I had you know, when I was 20, I had to go to my partner got pregnant and we had to leave Ireland and we went to London. And I rang Mam up from a phone box on Blackstock Avenue and to tell her. And of course, we weren't married, and you know, at the time, you had to be married. We'd no home. You know, it was difficult days. We went to London to get away from all that, and I rang Mam, and within 2 seconds, she knew what the story was, and she didn't mind it. She just immediately got on with it. I mean, Mam had been judged quite a lot. You know, in them early years, the breakup, that type of scenario, there was a stigma around it. So Mam was non-judgmental in those regards, you know. And she was the first over to see us when our daughter was born in London at Christmas. Jasmine, my eldest girl. So you don't forget kindness, Arthur. That's one thing that always sticks with me. You always remember kindness, you know, and you can shape your life like that. So that was one particular thing. And years later, I had to move back into the house with Mam. And yeah, there was no problem. You know, the door was open. She was welcoming. She just got on with it, you know. Of course, over the years, she put up with me, you know, as you can imagine. Sometimes the sons aren't the easiest, you know yourself.
Oh yeah.
The wooden spoon was never far away. More of a variable job later on, you know, but younger, it was certainly there. And you know, I always had a very strong attachment to them. I remember the kindness. They were definitely a pattern and a thread through my life that I could really recommend. I really remember and visualize. I could chart that pathway for you if over the time, you know, as we all can, you know.
Yeah.
So that association with Mam, and I was there for Mam. You know, when Mam's sisters and all her brothers, when as they were going through illness and passing away, I was Mam's taxi driver, you know. So I brought Mam everywhere. We spent time together. We were very easy together. The odd couple we were like at times. I also had daughters, and Mam had only sons, so she loved my girls, and she was brilliant with them, and they loved her. You know, they really doted on her, and she was she was great in that regard. You know, so all of that, you know, the shared experiences, the kindness, really.
There was a bond. It sounds like there was a definite bond between the two of you. You knew each other quite well.
Yeah.
Tell us, when you first noticed, of course, the onset of Alzheimer's, what was it you first noticed?
It starts out with forgetfulness, as we know, but we are all forgetting. You know, I'm doing it myself now. You know, every time it happens to me now, I think, oh, here we go. But there were small things. You know, Mam putting too many briquettes on the fire, you know, the front door left open, or sitting in her coat. You know, falling asleep in the afternoon. Nothing majorly untoward. Mam's still functioning very much. I mean, she was going to mass every day. Sometimes taking the bus into town at the Poca Theatre on Malborough Street. She was getting her hair done every week, shopping. She was in two ladies' clubs. As I said, she sang in the choir. So all of them elements of her life were working. It was only I just had a good feeling something wasn't right, you know. And I started to record some of the incidents. I also met some people who had, and also my two aunties and my uncle had the experience, had Alzheimer's, and I had brought Mam to visit them many times, and I thought something wasn't right, you know. And I started to record some of the incidents there, and then they got a little more pronounced, and I thought something's going on here, and I brought Mam for a kind of memory test. It's a very basic test in the doctor, and she was looking at me like, what is going on here, you know. And I was trying to explain that I told Mam it was a regular checkup, but it wasn't. It was this memory test, and the tests are very basic. What's your name? Sign your name. What year is it? And Mum looked at me like, "What the hell am I doing here?" But I knew, right then I knew there's something not right here. And that was the real start into this is serious now.
Pick a chapter that stood out to you in terms of a memory of your mother's life.
Well, I suppose Mum's side was early, middle, and later is the kind of thing. I think later on, I suppose the early chapter with Mum was really about growing up here in Fairview and that early life into her being married. So for me, that was all recorded information I'd taken from other places. The next part of her life was in Santry and Glasnevin, where things weren't really good for our family, over the years, because when families break up, many things happen, and not all of them are good or positive,
Mm-hmm.
So that regard, it was probably later on when we moved back to Fairview, things settled down a lot for Mum, and it was that phase of her life, I suppose. Although she had a brilliant time in Iona, to be honest. I mean, she was up there, she was in the choir, she was in the ladies' club, she was heading to Lourdes, Medjugorje, you name it. She had been on the pilgrimages, and she had a lot of friends. All her family were well, and later, once my auntie got ill down at Fairview here, it started to be all pervasive around the family. Then so there was a change into her latter years, and things got quieter. And really, 20 years later here, the first illness manifested, and that was kind of just a broad outline of the pattern of her journey,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lots of high points. Mum had travelled all over the world really as well, She
Mm-hmm.
had my brother out in Australia, she'd been to Canada. As I said, she's been to a lot of pilgrimages, she's been to Italy and Spain and France. Her sister Betty was the one who organised the trips. Every family has one of them type of people. So, she's had a colourful life at that. She's 10 grandchildren. And 6 of them were girls. So delighted for her in that regard. So lots of colour and contrast and different elements to Mam's life. And she knew a lot of people, but Mam had a good sense of humour. She was very kind. And she was tolerant, and
Mm.
they're great traits to have.
Indeed.
Non-judgmental.
Mm.
You don't get a lot of that.
No, it's good. It's good to have those memories of that bond. Tell us about perhaps a day, as you mentioned, a particular day is broken up throughout the book. Give us a couple of moments that stood out to you in the book.
Yeah, I suppose following on to this early assessment of Mam, it reached a point somewhere near the start, actually, in 2018. I brought Mam to Mass in the Pro Cathedral, and we walked hand in hand into the shop. Mam was getting a little frailer now, and things are manifesting, and she went into Mass. She asked me, was I coming in? And I said, I'll be in a minute. She gave me the eyebrow, because she knew I was lying to her, which I was. And I went outside. I sat back in my car, finished a cigarette, and after 20 minutes or so, I went back in, and the church was empty, and Mam was not there. And I immediately thought, uh-oh. Check the Pro Cathedral. At the back of the Pro Cathedral, there's Statue of Mary. Mam would often light candles there. I went around the back, but no sign of her. Out onto Malborough Street, no sign of her. I ran down onto the quays to check where she had a bus stop. And at this time, I'm thinking, I can't remember what coat she's wearing. Why didn't I go to Mass? All of this type of thing. I run back to my car, no sign of her, up onto O'Connell Street. This is about 30 minutes, and there's no sign of her. It's April, it's cold, I'm overdressed, overheating, and really panicking. And I rang my friend Des and said, who lives next door, Des, I knew, would you just check and see if Mam has come home? As far as I knew, she'd no purse, And he said, there she is walking around the corner. So I got back in my car, totally relieved and quite shaken. And I thought, something's got to change here. This cannot go on, And that was a real turning point, and literally a turning point, because in my experience, I turned into the situation. Because you do hips, shoulders, and then you fully turn into the situation. that was the point I fully turned into the situation, and that was 2018. Ma'am, I suppose that was one major incident, and another one was really out when I brought her out for a walk out the coast. I mean, there was loads and loads of things. I mean, if I talk about the routine in the house, there was breakfast, showering ma'am, um, bringing her out for walks, dressing her, putting her to bed, getting her out of bed. Um, that's a constant. That's what's required. There's no shortcut.
How did she take to, I suppose she sounded like a woman, as you said, who came through that, rearing kids on her own, having two jobs and so forth, a very vibrant, a very even determined woman, I could say, if I could. But how did she take to her son then slowly doing more and more things for her, and her kind of conceding perhaps autonomy more and more over to somebody else?
Very gradually, thankfully, Arthur. Mam's decline was a slow and steady decline. Mam had quiet determination. She was very gentle, she was very easygoing, you know. Unlike myself, you see, we had that kind of personality, We were just casual enough. Um, I had spent my whole career working in the hospitality industry, and the basis of hospitality is looking after other people or doing things for other people, doing them well. Um, it was a fairly easy shift for me to do things for Mam, to take subtle control of different parts of the thing. Obviously, you're stepping on toes a lot. Where's the boundary? Where does caring start and autonomy begin? There's a gradual into that. And that took us a couple of years to get familiar. I think one of the things I used quite a lot was, I'd say, the same things in the same way at the same time. And Mam got used to my tone of voice and relaxing in, and eventually came to trust me, So as because I was here every day with Mam, um, I was very much finger on the pulse, Arthur. It helped an awful lot. Um, I noticed the small, subtle changes in Mam and was able to subtly change myself, my approach slightly, and that made a difference. It was nothing too abrupt. There was no real break. And in the gap or the abruptness comes fear. Small children, when they're somewhere they're not used to, become afraid. And people with Alzheimer's dementia, when you take them out of their comfort zone, they become afraid. And when they become afraid, they react. And that can be quite disturbing for a son trying to control that. So I was able to stay very close to Mam's experience. And as Mam started to lose a bit more, I was able to fill the gap,
Mm,
and that worked very well, but it was my proximity to Mam.
mm.
Um, I never left the situation, so I didn't go away and come back next week and saw changes in Mam that I couldn't figure out. And the result of that incident in the Pro Cathedral when I lost Mam was when I got back to Fairview. I was speaking to my friend Des, and Des is a palliative care nurse in the Manor Hospital, and he said to me, or sorry, an advanced nurse practitioner in the Manor Hospital, beg your pardon. He said to me, "You can't do this from the outside. You're going to have to go into your mom's world and operate, see it as she sees it, because you can't do it from the outside. It's too difficult." I said, "Okay." That was a key statement, because I thought, "Okay, I'll do that. I can do that. I can just a slight adjustment from my position, go in. So take a deep breath here. Am I going to do it or not do it? I took the pace out of it by going into Mam's world. I had to go at her pace as she saw it. That wasn't easy at times, but it was very effective. So them type of things leading into it.
Tell me, how was it for you as a son? Of course, naturally, as young children, we're dependent on our mothers. We grow up as boys, we become men, we become more, stand on our own 2 feet. We set off in the world by ourselves, but still there's an attachment there. So for you as the son coming back to look after your mother, for the role to be reversed, for you to become the caregiver, talk us through how you were dealing with that emotionally, psychologically, what that meant for you and how you coped with that.
Yeah, I think what overrides it all is this witnessing the decline of your loved one. In this case, my mom Patricia. So that gnaws at you all the time. That's always there. If you decide to embark on this journey, you must understand that is going to be a companion, a companion with you along the way. It's something you must embrace. Um, Ma'am has an illness. She is not an illness herself, and when you're able to differentiate the two, it gives you a much better opportunity to carry on with your tasks. Um, I think it wears on you. It's fatiguing, in the deep tissue. The mind forgets, the body remembers, and you know, I I had to find ways and things that sustained me. And one of the key things was Mam's smile. Mam, on the inside of the book, I have one picture only, and it's a black and white of Mam when she was 16, and her beautiful smile is there. This was Mam before she was Mrs. Coote, and before she had kids. It was her as herself, and her smile is there. And all through Mam's years, despite her illness, as it became heavier on her, and it does wear it. They do wear the illness. I found Mam wore the illness, and her smile would come to the surface, aren't they? That was something I could tangibly link onto. To understand that despite the frustrations and the small thing, all of the care and attention, she was there in the center of this terrible illness that she had. So you find things like that to sustain yourself. The As well as that, the practical action of things. I think as men, particularly, to be doing things. We're better when we're doing things. Sitting around doesn't suit us. It doesn't work. So the practical nature of the task, the repetition of the tasks, that helped. You don't ever get used to your loved one being diminished, but you once you agree to do the task, once you decide to move forward with it, um, then you start to see things slightly differently. I was very present in the experience. I was determined that I would not be derailed by the experience itself. I was also determined that I could dictate the tone of the experience. I could bring positive energy to it. I could be front foot. I could be well organized. I could keep my sense of humor and keep contact with people. So you do play a part. It's a difficult illness for sure, but all illness is difficult. And you are in control of where it takes you, though. Me having good relationship with Mom helped. So being in our neighborhood helped. Our neighbors helped. My daughters helped. So lots of things that came in on top of it. Once I had decided I was going to take care of Mom, so my kind of line was to turn uh, right intentions into right actions. My intention was to take care of Mom, but I didn't know how to do it, and that was the action. But I turned into it, and eventually I got a handle on it. I realized, Arthur, I had the skill set to deal with this. I could be motivated. I can be front foot. I had worked in the hospitality, doing functions for four or 500 people with 60, 70 staff, and a lot of moving parts. And I had done that for many years. So yeah, this was just kind of down into that. But yeah, it never goes away.
Of course, you didn't, I imagine, want to break the news to her black and white, so forth. You had to kind of deal with her gently. But how did you actually manage to communicate to her that from that point on things were going to have to change because things were changing and there were things?
Um, I never really did, Arthur, to be honest. I just went with it.
Mm,
I mean, there's no point in saying, I think you have dementia. It doesn't make any sense.
mm,
Um, the part of taking on the role was to take on the knowledge and keep it to yourself. You
no.
know, um, I didn't allow anything to intrude into Mam's world to suggest there was anything wrong. It wouldn't have made any sense. It may have upset her.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to gain anything by the information, so I decided, sure, I'll just deal with it myself.
Hmm.
It wasn't going to benefit her in any way. And you start to realize as well that doing one thing at a time is all that a person with dementia can really deal with.
Hmm.
So multitasking doesn't work. Bunches of information don't work. And also, if you could control your own ego, and I don't mean that in just a pure, it's all about me thing, but if you can really just stay in the moment and keep with the other person, you really don't need to say too much. My job was to manage the situation, not to grab it.
Hmm.
I wasn't to grab hold of it. My was to put kid gloves left and right and let ma'am move between the two.
Hmm.
I would stop her going obviously too far left or too far right, because I was protecting her, I was going to mind her. But within that frame, she was going to be able to be herself as much as she could be.
Hmm.
Obviously, that grip and that uh, range of movements got slightly narrower as man became, more dependent, more fragile in physical nature. Um, but I never, no, I never let on anything like that. That was all just
Tell,
obvious. But
tell me, what I'd like to gather is just a moment, perhaps, be it from your childhood or from your early adult years before she was diagnosed, and indeed another moment, if you could, after her diagnosis. Just give us two moments that really kind of warm your heart when you think of her. One in younger years and one while she actually had the illness. Just to paint the picture that even though people may indeed get Alzheimer's, but they're still the same person. They're still the person they can still be loved deep down. Just give us a couple of moments, if you would.
I suppose, Mum decided she wanted to learn to drive, and when she was in her 70s. And she was like the Michael Schumacher here at Fairview for a few years, and the terrifying experience of in the car with her, But, when Mum started the car up, the cats and dogs in the neighborhood all kind of get off the road, And that was something she liked to do. She was determined to do it, There was no stop. Mum had quite determination, so there's no stop here. Um, Rarely would Mum be tough or very very firm, but she was firm with this. And we kind of laughed about it, but I mean, God, we worried for her. Mum told me a story when she was a child. She once took an apple from the local shop, and her mother found out about it and brought her back down to the shop with the half-eaten apple, and made her give back the half-eaten apple and apologize. So my mum had a mantra. She never took a thing in her life. She wouldn't take that, as she said. So when mum learned to drive, she was driving actually legally, because as a learner to drive, you had to have someone in the car with you. But it was too dangerous, and we used to just let her off herself. So she was committing these crimes every day. We hadn't the heart to tell her. So there was quite a determination about her. But I tell you an incident that later, when Mam was ill, I was the chef in the house, unfortunately and fortunately. But I'd made this salad for Mam this particular evening, and the ham, cheese, lettuce, and I cut it all up because you had to cut it up to have bread, cup of tea, and we were kind of TV dinner style, sitting at the TV watching it. Mam had a little table with this plate of this salad I was so happy about. Cup of tea, bit of bread, put it in front of Mam. And myself and my daughters were sitting on the couch eating pasta or something like that. And there was a show on the telly, Another 48 Hours is called. It's kind of an American detective show. And in the show, there was kind of a criminal being interrogated by a detective. And the criminal had said something, and the detective said, "That's a lot of crap you're giving me." And Ma'am said, out of the blue, she pushed her table away with her foot, and she turned, she looked at us and said, "Talking about crap," she said, "look what they gave me for dinner tonight." And we just broke our hearts laughing. I mean, that was so fun. We all stopped in amazement. Everyone looked at Ma'am. They all looked at me, and then we all burst out laughing. It was very unusual. And then Ma'am got a complete fright, and she started to laugh. And you had this musical laughter coming from this woman who was supposed to be, who was obviously losing her faculties through this terrible illness. But here she was at the surface, laughing and joking amongst us. Um, Afterward, she completely forgot about the incident and she ate all her dinner. So it's this, that moment really threw me. I have to say, I went out into the garden afterwards and I was like, what is going on here? Jeez, how would you, what is this thing? I mean, I understand what it is, the medical thing, but this memory, who are we? Where are we coming out from this in and out? So, um, it just a determination of man being herself, uh, the toughness of her, the humor of it all, the links between who she was all the time. They're all very evident. For Mam's 80th birthday, Arthur, I took 80 photographs out of the family album type of thing, and I stuck them all on the walls downstairs because I wanted anyone who came to the house to know all of this. This is all who Mum is. You know, she's not just that granny sitting inside there, gone very quiet.
If you could speak to somebody, speak to people listening, because for somebody who has recently understood that somebody they dearly love has been diagnosed with this illness, what would you say to them to encourage them from your own experience and what you've learned throughout the years before, during, and after, and even writing the book, cataloguing it all, writing the book? What would you say to somebody faced with this?
I think Martha, the main thing is my book is my experience. You know, it's a very personal experience. My set of circumstances, which are complicated, allowed me to um, to take care of Mum. I was here at home. Obviously the house here. I had help from the family. Um, my own experience myself. I was able to leave my job down. My kids were more or less grown up. So all of that helped for me to make the decision. Um, and I'm very careful to only speak to that because it's very difficult for everybody, and it is a very emotive and difficult decision for everybody. Probably the hardest decision you'll ever have in your entire life. That said, I chose because it's a fork in the road moment, I believe, and I was lucky enough to be able to take the fork that led me to today. Um, my journey was 5 years with Mum at home, but now once when Mum passed, I was determined to follow after. I was determined not to be full of regret and remorse. I think I'd done a good effort, and I don't think I deserved that. The 5 years had been difficult, and I'd sacrificed, and I'd done the right thing. End of story. And I would do it again tomorrow if you need, no problem. But after completing it, I was determined not to be on the wrong side of regret and remorse. And I find that a lot of people end up on the wrong side of that. And to get through the valley of regret and remorse is very difficult. And a lot of people get lost there and never come out of it, actually. My experience, because I was able to take the path, it meant that when the smoke cleared and Mum passed, and I kind of finally stood up again and had a look around me, I was on the right side of regret and remorse. And in front of me was that broad, open plain of my future. And I could do anything I wanted there. That's the after. The effect, the afterward to so if you're faced with the decision and you have a chance to do it, the rewards are huge, and immeasurable, but you can't see around corners, nobody can. But in my experience, I've passed through the experience and it worked. My mum passed in her own bed in her own home. Um, I can't tell you how much that means to me. And to her, she was never afraid, but I was able to do it. So the option is there. It took me 5 years, but now I have 25 years, touch wood, of remembrance, of positive remembrances. And also, as well, I wrote a book about the experience. You know, the book is all about Mum. I have Mum in there, but it's also a record of our experience. Without the book, it would be forgotten. It wouldn't exist really in a lot of ways. So there's that benefit from it. I'm here talking to you about it, and perhaps someone listening, because the radio for me was a great lifeline. The radio was always on in our house, always on. With two radios in the house, one upstairs, one downstairs. Mum liked the radio on all the time because she didn't like to be in the house when it was quiet. A quiet house is an empty house. And when you have a quiet house and you've lived there your whole life, there's a lot of memories in the house and you can hear that, the ghosts of those who've gone before. So the radio was always on, but it provided a lifeline to the outside world. Although we were kind of repeating different tasks, the music was always changing. The tone was always changing. The voices from outside, you weren't alone like that. And you can access that. And speaking to any of the listeners now, I'm absolutely sure anyone going through the experience has their radio on. They're listening to the world outside. There are, you know, there are voices there to help. You can access it. It's all right to get in and do it. And a life doesn't end; it's just different. Um, so if you have an opportunity, um, to do some part of it. Yeah, maybe you could do that. The benefits for yourself are immeasurable. And the further you move away from the decision to maybe not take that path, the less the less sense that decision can make, I think, over the years. So yeah, and I think I was lucky too as well. You need a bit of luck.
Indeed, it's a very interesting point you made earlier on, that your mother, she wasn't an illness, she had an illness, and that's a good way to look at it. And indeed, it's an incredible story to hear what you were saying about your relationship. Indeed, having those memories, of course, are something money can't buy, and nothing can buy as memories such as those.
No, it's a very so it's my story is a very normal human story, as you could take my name out of it, Mam's name out of it, and the dates, and it's happening all over. I mean, I dedicated the book to the people who've gone before, caring now, and will care in the future for someone they love. And it's such a story that goes on and on. There's a lot of familiarity in the tone and the words, and I met people telling me different versions of that story along the way. I was just lucky enough maybe to put mine into a book format, and maybe and get the word out there. And Mam would be delighted. And when Mam passed, Arthur, it was on Halloween night, on the 31st of October. Obviously, it was evening time. There was fireworks outside, and I like to think that Mam went into the next world thinking that fireworks were for her. So there's always something there if you want to. You can make things from it. Big time.
Indeed, it's a great story. Indeed, it's a powerful story. Kieran Coote, author of the book Mam and Me: Living a Lifetime in a Day. Thank you so much for taking time to chat to me today.
Thanks very much, Arthur. Pleasure. Really enjoyed it, John.